One of the most extraordinary things Orlando says, which I think sort of encapsulates to some degree the Rice gift and what some would see as the Rice problem, is conform or leave. That was the motto. You did it the way Rice wanted it done, or you were out. True.
Yeah, many are called, but few are chosen, because few choose. I mean, he was very, very definite. You have to make a choice. He was very big about proposing to the students that they are personally responsible for their behavior, 724, 365, and for their academic performance. Teachers are there to teach and to help in any way possible, but they are ultimately responsible. But he also made great pains because he would go into classrooms all the time and commandeer parts of periods to articulate precisely what he expected, that you passing grade is 70 and what it is to get on the honor roll, and articulate all the components of grading and behavior. So he was constantly teaching the young men as a group and personally how to conform, meaning how to accept the ethos and do one's work and achieve.
It's primarily an ethos of responsibility, as I would see it.
Yeah.
For example, he had, what was the gift he gave, or the award he gave for the first person to return something that was lost? There was
it was a Good Finder's Award.
Good Finder's Award, that's it.
Yeah.
So if people were tempted to walk off with a book, a cell phone, an iPod or something, they were rewarded publicly. Their name went up.
Yeah. A lot of positive reinforcement for positive behavior. Also to counterbalance the prestige of the athletes. So he made great efforts to make, getting on the honor roll the coolest thing. He kind of played down the academics and then all kinds of good behavior. There was
play down the what? The academics?
No, play down the athletics.
Okay.
And really play up the the academics and the behavior. He was not all that interested in basketball himself, and it was there, and fine, it did what it did. But the reality is, it wasn't the purpose of an education, and they tried to get it to the students who were athletes to the idea that it's really not, if you're playing basketball, that gets you a college education, and that's the way you think of it. In fact, Andre Barrett, who was the point guard that year, went to Seton Hall, and then he eventually played in the NBA. But Orlando coached him on his college application, and they made a deal with Seton Hall that if Andre stayed 4 years and played, he could at any date later come back and do a graduate degree for free. And that was the deal they made.
Unusual deal. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between Catholic urban schools and public urban schools. You talked a bit earlier about the percent that graduate, particularly of young men, and go on to college. That is the graduation rate. College entry rates. What else? Is there anything else that distinguishes, not that that isn't enough, the two groups of schools? And money. And cost.
Well, I'll give you an example. I was at another Catholic high school. It was in Brooklyn, 850 students, co-ed, almost all African American, tough part of Brooklyn. And I did an informal survey. Why are you here? Not Catholic for the most part. You have to pay. Somebody's working 2 or 3 jobs, or there's some kind of scholarship. It's difficult to be here. Lots of demands, and almost every student, first or second reason, because there is discipline. These are tough kids in tough neighborhoods. They were choosing to be there because of the discipline, because of the order, because of the structure, because of the basic skills, and I think because of the focus on that. That's what distinguishes two systems more than anything else, especially in the inner cities, because the public school system and from the top on down does not, as an institution and as a system, establish the sort of preconditions to learning. That there is you have to show up on time and behave and be quiet and there's certain things about learning you can't learn if in chaos. So so these preconditions are taken care of at the Catholic school, and then a focus on basics. Kids need to learn to read and write, and often if you're just still hung up on whole language or whatever, as kids coming from poor backgrounds where they don't come in knowing how to read and write a lot at kindergarten level, some approaches are not going to work very well.
There's also a larger, at least I would guess, the workload, as you describe it, is considerable. These young men do not go home and have a lot of time for playing video games or something else. There are enormous demands on them academically. True?
There's a lot, yeah, there is homework, for sure. Rice was, you're dealing with, Rice is a school that does the heavy lifting. You're dealing with students from families, 90% single-parent families. Most of whom, not a lot have graduated from college. Certainly, very few, if any, have gone to university. So they're not coming out of an academic tradition. So the school is doing the heavy lifting.
There's a place in the book, won't be able to find it immediately, where there's a young man, I think it's Linwood. Is that his
Linwood
name?
Sessoms, yeah.
Yes, who was asked, he wrote a completely incoherent paper, but it was long enough, and it had something like sentences in it. And the response of his teacher was to smile, right, if I remember correctly, compliment him for it. And what happened to this young man, who clearly, this was in his senior year, as I recall.
Right. Well, if in all honesty, there are some students at Rice who achieve a fairly high level and even go on to the Ivy Leagues. Most students are not achieving at a high level. The average SAT score that year was, out of 1,600, was under 800. Not high, but they're catching up. Is the best way of putting it. Many of them are coming in at reading at grade 3 and 4 and 5 levels. Linwood was one of those.
Yeah.
So Linwood, his first attempt at the SAT, he got 500 out of 1,600. You get 400 for signing your name.
Right.
And he would be the first to admit he just was not academic. But he learned what the Catholic school, what he did learn was persistence, a work ethic, and failure inspired in him, capacity to work. So he would go back and apply himself and worked really hard, got his SAT up to over 900, and got into Hofstra.
One of the other facets is something you call, and I don't think it's your invention, the common school effect.
Right.
Which I think is Anthony Brike, who is a graduate of Lynch School of Education, will take credit for some of that, and a very distinguished educational researcher. But something Tony, and tell us what you mean, what Tony means by the common school effect and why that's useful.
Well, it's the idea that, to me, it rests on the most fundamental claim of Christianity, that all human beings have intrinsic worth, and therefore all deserve an education, regardless of how well they're going to perform. And that, in the common school effect, sort of manifests that in the sense that all students are taught the same, regardless of whether they're ultimately going to get 51 and just get by, or get 99 and get into Yale or Harvard. So there's a commonality of approach. It's not a streaming, and within the context of order and discipline, and basic skills, and some strong content. Try to give what students need to succeed, and a sense of a bit of a sense of core curriculum, so they have some content as well.
Who staffs Rice?
Who staffs it?
Yeah.
Well, it's owned and run by the Irish Christian Brothers.
But they are not there, except with some rare exceptions.
They maintain a few brothers there. They try to keep a brother as they have a president principal model, so they try to keep one of the brothers as president, and then there is one brother teaching full time, another brother teaching part time and running the office. So
And what kind of lay people, if you will, work at Rice?
A complete range. There are a number of Catholics, but there's a number of non-Catholics. That year, and for a number of years, the dean of discipline was a practicing Muslim who was a great asset to the school.
How is Rice Catholic? How would you define
How is it Catholic?
How is it?
Well, certainly the values are there. I mean, I suppose, having gone to Catholic school, you walk into Rice, and it's a little bit exotic looking in the sense that everybody's black, and where I went to school in Canada, everybody was whiter than white. But within a few minutes, things are very familiar. It functions like a Catholic school. It looks the same. The students act like Catholic school students. They're boisterous, but they're very respectful. There's a sense of joy and hope and positivity. There's a moral universe there, which I think is really important to a school, because instead of what can I get away with, which is certainly mainstream and street culture, it's what should I do? That starts taking root. A sense of respect, a sense of every individual is valuable, that the norm is treating people properly and helping each other, and that the exception is a moral failing. And the religion classes and the prayer and all these things do affect the students, and they don't fight it. I mean, most of them are coming out of a Baptist tradition, and they're all for a faith-based education. So their parents, they don't have an issue with it. The parents of non-Catholic students will say, you know what, going to a Catholic school actually interests my son more in our religion. So you get more of a, the irony is that sometimes the brothers or the Catholic teachers would apologize, kind of be apologetic about a liturgy that's Catholic or whatever, rather than truly realizing that it's fully embraced by the
students.
By the student.